That's a voluntary decision that they made. Now, the government has recognized that, called it a limited liability corporation, but it's recognized a contractual dispute. Now, you cannot lend, you can choose not to lend a corporation money because you think it's too much of a risk and you'd rather be able to actually go after the money of the shareholders.
His argument is that work or die is coercion. It absolutely is. Of course it's coercion. Like, I mean, people are like, oh yeah, we have all these safety nets in modern society. If you don't want to work, you can do it. That's just not true. That's not true at all. Like, those social safety nets are sparse depending on where you live, and they will not like sustain life.
This starts off, I got a little connected by Ben Burgess. I think in the wake of the Steven Crowder, I believe, debacle, or depending on your perspective, wonderful phenomena. You reached out to Ben.
Even he's laughing about that? Oh man, Crowder, that's cold. I hope he's so like out of it on CBD right now. He doesn't have to hear any of this. That's, oh man, eating their own.
Said I would like to debate Sam, and I was down, and so here we are. Let me. Well, I'm not going to make you comment on the Steven Crowder.
What's this about Vosh versus Charlie Kirk? I only know what the internet has told me so far, but apparently it's going down. And should it go down, oh yes, I will be streaming that one. I'll be the official streamer on the left because I can't wait to see that. So I'll stream it on the YouTubes. Apparently it's going to be in Tim Pool's Beanie compound, and he's building a giant dome. It's going to be kind of like an octagon, but it's a massive beanie, kind of like a tent that they actually get into, like a kind of like a sweat lodge, and then they just wrestle in the middle of it, like old Greco-Roman style. I'm very excited for this, and that's all I know so far. But Beanie Dome is going down. It's going to be wild. Charlie Kirk versus Vaush. I think it's a thing. You know, it's a real thing. It'll be a 1 versus 3. Who's the 3? Oh, is it going to be Tim Pool and Moonlord? Is Moonlord going to be there? Cassandra Fairbanks. Oh, well, it just keeps getting better. Man, wow, what a pay-per-view event. Yeah, I'll definitely be streaming that. And then you can have my you know, witty retorts in the corner every now and then, while people who are just tuning in to watch the debate are like, who the fuck is that guy who keeps talking? Why the fuck is he talking? Don't talk over this. Let them talk. Bro, I didn't tune in for this, brah. What's going on?
So, okay. So with this said, what shall we discuss libertarianism?
Well, I mean, I'll just clarify. I'm not exactly a libertarian, and I know this is probably in the weeds for you guys, but I like to differentiate myself from them. I'm not an anarchist. I'm not a complete subjectivist, as many libertarians are. But sure, we can discuss free markets, and we can discuss capitalism. We could discuss, debate them, or however you want to present it.
All right. Well, I mean, let's start with free markets, because sure. I am of the opinion that there's really no such thing as a free market, and True. That markets only really can exist, particularly in this day and age, but in general, with governments, essentially, that governments create and structure markets, and that there really isn't a free market. It's really just a question of, how the market is structured in such a way and who it benefits.
Well, what's the question is what is freedom? That is, what does it mean to say there's a free market? Freedom is the absence of coercion. It's the absence of force. It's the absence of an authority that says this is how things have to be. And if you don't abide by the rules, we put you in jail or we shoot you or whatever. Free market is a system in which the governments exist, but the role of government is to protect rights, to protect individual rights. It's to leave you alone, to make choices based on your values, based on your pursuits, based on your choices, to leave you alone to do all that. And
that's the role of government? My. All right.
To protect you from other people who want to do you harm. So you need government because you need a monopoly over the use of force. But other than that,
he's a minarchist, which means he thinks the only valid things the government does are police, military, and courts. Well, yeah, of course. That's basically the dream, right? Like, let's have limited government. I don't want to have any social spending. I don't want to have Medicare, Medicaid. I don't want to pay for people's schools. I don't want to pay for people's roads. I don't want to pay for their health. I don't want to have to pay for any of that. but I like my stuff because I have a lot of stuff. So I want a lot of people who can protect me and my stuff, and also from foreign invaders. So I don't mind if the majority of my taxes go towards the army or the police. That's all great. Okay, I want the biggest government possible in that respect. Hopefully they never tread on me. Hopefully they never come after me and mine, because then that would probably smash my ideals there.
The government should leave you free, and that's what free markets mean. It means where the government is not dictating to you how you should live, what products to buy, how much to pay your employees, etc.
Wait, I mean, do you think we have free markets in this?
No, I don't think we've ever really had free markets. I think we've gotten close to it. I think it's gotten close to it. And I think it's possible to get free markets in the future. And I think to the extent that we get towards free markets, to that extent, we're richer and better off and more flourishing.
I want to circle back as to who the we is in that, because
that'd be great. Happy to.
But we're like, what?
How can there be libertarians if I've never heard of them working at a libertarian? Checkmate libertarians.
Products.
Thank you, libertarians, for the $10 donation. I appreciate that, and you're entirely correct. Got him.
And whatnot, and explain to us like what you perceive as the lack of freedom there, and what you think is obviously supported and structured by the government, but still represents freedom.
Oh, there's massive amounts of lack of freedom in labor markets, for example. Minimum wage is a lack of freedom. Requiring employers to pay benefits is a lack of freedom. The restrictions on firing and hiring, many of the discrimination laws are
a lack of freedom for the bosses, right? He wants the bosses to have complete, not the workers though. He doesn't want the workers to have freedom. He would like them to be as restricted as possible. Like, can we just abolish the minimum wage? Can I not pay my workers $1 an hour? Why don't we do that? Why can't I hire children? They've got little hands. They can get into like smaller devices. You know, they could definitely build some kind of electronics for me at some point. So why can't I have freedom to hire children and not pay them? Because that's freedom.
An example of a lack of freedom. Any intervention of the government in a voluntary activity, in a voluntary exchange between two individuals, that is not coerced, that is not illegal, but
what do you mean by illegal? I mean,
yeah, I mean the only thing that should be illegal is fraud.
The law.
That's not fraudulent. That's not fraudulent.
It's not fraudulent.
Yeah.
Okay, so I mean, what about things like tax breaks, or what about what about, I don't know.
I don't think there should be tax breaks. I think that if you're going to have a tax system, taxes should be flat, and they should be as close to zero as possible, and they should be simple, and everybody should pay exactly the same. There should be no breaks.
There should be
corporations at the end of the day don't really pay taxes. They pass it on to consumers and they pass it on to employees. So corporate taxes make zero sense from anybody's perspective, because the economics of it is workers pay corporate taxes. It's just a hidden employment tax.
I mean, I don't think that's necessarily the case. But
every economic study out there shows that at the end of the day, the corporate tax is either paid by consumers in higher prices or by employees in lower wages. There is no such thing. Shareholders pay very little in corporate taxes.
Shareholders.
Then who pays? There is no such thing as a corporation. It's just an excess of
he just said there's no such thing as a corporation.
Contracts, right?
No,
just a series of contracts.
Corporations will pay taxes on.
So let's say you've just crash landed on an island full of coconut trees, Yaron.
Thanks, Coconut Island. Oh, I get that reference. It's a reference to Fortnite and Tomato Town, right?
Just pass on all of those expenses. They may.
There is no such thing as a corporation, Sam. Corporations are just people, right? So which are the people within the corporation that actually pay the tax?
Well, the entity.
But the entity, the cash sitting in the bank account of the entity is owned by shareholders, right? So if it's either shareholders are paying the tax or they pass it on.
Not yet.
But it's their property. Legally, it's their property.
It is not their money yet until it's passed on to them, and then which case the government takes a part. I mean, no more than my money is Matt's money right now because I'm going to pay him in the future. It's not his money yet.
Well, to the extent that you have a contract with him, sure, he has a claim against you.
But then I give money to the government as well at that moment.
They have a claim against you as well. Okay. So it's in that sense, it's their money.
And do you have and so you don't think that there's any type of
Wait, he genuinely doesn't think corporations exist? That it's just a series of contracts between individuals? That's all that's happening here?
coercion that is set up in between this relationship that is a function of government. For instance, like protecting property rights, like building infrastructure, like shielding those individuals who are surrounded by the corporation, which is a legal protection that the worker may not have. Do you see that as a government intervention?
So let's take them one at a time, right? So protecting property rights, no, all the government there is doing is protecting something that's mine. It's not the government's. The government is just recognizing the fact that I created something and it is now mine, and it's protecting my ability to use it. That's what property rights mean. Rights are not something the government grants you. It's something that is recognized. It's a principle of human interaction that the government is protecting. So rights are not things. Rights are freedoms of action. All rights mean is it's a recognition that you are free of coercion, and that the government's job is to protect that freedom. And property is the same thing. You know, I earn something. It's mine. The government is protecting my ability to keep it.
Okay. So the government, it's not just a question of the government recognizing your right. It is a question of the government deploying its power in defense of that right. And it's also defining that it's yours, right?
It's not defining it's mine. Reality defines that it's mine. It's a fact that it's mine. You know, if I produce something,
hold on for a second.
Yeah,
if reality defines that something's yours, how is it that what is the use of, why do we have courts that very often have to step in to define whose this is?
Because we often disagree about things out of reality, right? I mean, we have courts to decide who murdered person X.
Well, but even though murder.
In reality, somebody murdered him. Now it's a question of do we know, and there's disagreement about what happened. So there are disagreements about property rights, and that's why you have a court system. But the fact is, somebody owns this stuff. Somebody created it, and therefore it is of somebody's.
I don't even know where he's going to start with all this, because it's all so out there. I didn't know this was the way the Ayn Rand Institute thinks. I should have known. I should it checks.
You had government before you had a government.
Hold on, wait. I want to just focus on this, because on one hand you say it is, we know who owns this because it's reality, but in fact you're also acknowledging that different people can have a different view of reality.
So we have disagreements. Yes.
Okay, we have disagreements about the reality of who owns this.
Yes, and one person's right and one person's wrong, and that's the job of the courts, is to help us decide that.
In other words, the government decides whose ownership, who's going to have that ownership right. And it's not just a function of you built this. I mean, property exists before you get there, but it can be I created this. But we also have regimes for who owns the creation of that.
Slaves built quite a lot, for instance.
And so
that's not free markets, right? We're talking about what would happen in the free market. So the fact that slave built something the fact that slavery existed is evil and an abomination. But that's not what we're talking about, right? We're talking about under freedom, what happens to property rights. And what I'm saying is that you create, Matt, you pay Matt a certain amount of money. That's his. That's a contract between you and him. You got to decide that Matt's worth X and he gets X. That is all the government is going to do is say, okay, well, if there's a dispute between you and Matt, the government's going to say, what did Sam promise Matt? What is therefore Matt's? What is Sam's? Based on that promise. So the government is there to intervene when there's a disagreement between you. But the property rights allocation, the amount of money coming into you, and then the amount of money you give Matt is voluntarily decided between you and Matt. Matt has a property right claim against what you promised him. That's all. I mean, property rights are not that hard. They are, you work, you produce, and then you get stuff.
Yaron.
Yeah. And then you get stuff.
My father's an attorney, right? Whose entire career has been resolving these type of disputes. So it's not complicated, but it's not just a question. It is the government that comes in and ultimately decides and shapes the property right. I mean,
sure. And that's why we want government. We want a government that is focused on doing a good job not shaping property rights, but recognizing property rights, doing it objectively, doing it transparently, and not getting bogged down with the millions of regulations and controls and millions of things that we have today. Rather, if we lived in a simple free market.
Yeah, Chad, let's make fun of his ideas, okay? Not his speech. His ideas are ridiculous and they deserve to be mocked. If he's got a speech impediment, that one's not grounds for the chuckles. But everything else that's coming out of his mouth most certainly is, because it's utterly ridiculous.
Market world, government would have one job. It would be relatively easy and things would be a lot simpler than they are right now. And your father would probably not have a job.
Okay.
I'm sorry, I don't mean your father, but there'll be a lot fewer lawyers in the world, right?
I understand. So now, what would that look like, and how would that work? I'm very curious about that. If government was more, in your aspirational view of
His voice is objectively the best part about him. I mean, certainly not his ideas.
the world, how would that work? How would we determine property rights, let's say?
Well, I gave you an example between
Thank
you and Matt, right?
Oh, damn. Tier 2. Thank you very much.
So Matt would have a property right over what you paid him, right?
Yes, Homo.
Whatever
Right.
contractually you promised to pay Matt, that's now his. And then if he went and he bought a home, there is a role for government to have a registry, but that's about it, of who owns what, so that there's not a lot of confusion about, who owns a piece of land. But that's it. There's no, he would buy it from somebody. Now it's his because he acted to gain it. He could, as a consequence, do with it basically what he wanted. It was now his home.
Could he burn plastic on it?
Well, if the plastic was not harming his neighbors, if his neighbors were being harmed by the burned plastic, then they could sue him to prevent him from burning it. So, I mean, again, the common law is all, what's that?
Sue him in the government's courts.
Well, I'm not against government. I believe governments are necessary, and governments are there to protect you from harm. So they would have to sue him in the government's courts and show harm in order to stop him. So governments are there to do this one thing. So I'm not against the existence of government. I think
I understand
that, wonderful things when they're very limited.
Yaron, I'm trying to figure out how your world is different than the one that we're existing in. Because when you say do harm, who defines that it's harmful?
So I'll give you an example.
Wait a second. So Matt and I don't know I don't know, sort of like at birth, that the inhalation of the burning plastics are going to do me harm. And maybe there are some plastics that he's burning that actually wouldn't do me harm. Mm-hmm. The government writes regulations and makes determinations through the EPA, let's say, that it does do harm. And
is this the guy who's been teaching Dave Rubin everything he knows? Because it sounds like similar rhetoric. You know how he's like, well, what we need is builders not to have any regulations, because then the free market, it'll figure this all out. Like, if you make a bad building, people won't hire you because they'll leave bad Yelp reviews. And so you won't do it because you don't want bad Yelp reviews. That's the free market.
The basis of my argument that his burning does harm there. How is this
to the extent
how is that world different? How that's your fantasy world. How is that different from our existing
fantasy?
The difference is this, that how much you pay Matt is not an issue of harm. How much you pay Matt is not an issue of harm. That's true. Burning plastic, if it really does harm, in some sense,
it is absolutely an issue of harm. I know that Sam's not going to press him on this because there's no way you're going to get into his head that if you're paying your workers less than even the minimum wage, that's a big old problem. They're not going to be able to live off that, and then they're going to be working themselves to the bone. But that's absolutely an issue of harm.
Your world and my world look the same. If there's harm, right? The way to prove harm might be a little different, but at the end of the day, if there's harm, it will look the same. If you beat Matt up, if you whip him, right? You try to enslave him. He brought up slavery before. Then the government would intervene to stop you from doing that, both in your world and in mine, right? But where the difference happens is your choice of whether to pay Matt's healthcare or not. Now, I don't know if you're required to pay him because maybe you're too small of a business to do so. I don't know how many employees you would need, but at some point, that there are hundreds, if not thousands, of regulations that dictate how you and Matt should treat each other that have nothing to do with harm, have nothing to do with force, have nothing to do with coercion, have something to do with some kind of social policy. We believe that everybody should have health care. Therefore, the best way to do it is through employers, and we will force employers to provide that. My government would never do. If you want to pay Matt healthcare, you guys can negotiate. Maybe he prefers to get cash. Maybe he doesn't want you to pay his healthcare.
Does your government have corporations? In other words, does your government give certain benefits?
So you raised the limited liability issue. So let's deal with the limited liability issue. I mean, the limited liability issue for the most part is a contractual issue. It is an issue that relates to the relationship between debt holders and shareholders. Basically, debt holders are...
This is the Coconut Island argument. What was Vash's Coconut Island argument? That was what he made to Bastia, right?
Saying we're willing to lend you as a corporate entity money in exchange for not... And we know by doing this, it's in the covenants of the bond, that we can't go after the individual wealth of shareholders. That's a voluntary decision that they made. Now, the government has recognized that. called it a limited liability corporation, but it's recognized a contractual dispute. Now, you cannot lend, you can choose not to lend a corporation money because you think it's too much of a risk and you'd rather be able to actually go after the money of the shareholders.
His argument is that work or die is coercion. It absolutely is. Of course it's coercion. Like, I mean, people are like, oh yeah, we have all these safety nets in modern society. If you don't want to work, you can do it. That's just not true. That's not true at all. Like, those social safety nets are sparse depending on where you live, and they will not like sustain life.
That's all it is. I mean, a big deal is made out of this, but limited liability basically is just a formalization of a market contract, a voluntary contract.
But Yaron, there may be voluntary, between the debt holder and the shareholder. But in terms of the corporation and the public, the public doesn't volunteer for any of that. I, as an S corp, have certain protections that amongst people I've never even met before.
So what are you protected from?
So if you crash land on an island and you wake up, the other survivor has hoarded all the coconuts. They tell you that you need to suck their dick for the coconut. So yes, that would be coercion.
Right now, in our society, which is market-oriented, if you don't like using the term capitalist, there are exploitative forces on the average person. They have to do certain things or they don't get to enjoy a certain quality of life. They're forced into doing some things. How would this change in an ANCAP society?
That's life. You have to do
wait. So your argument is that there is just going to be exploitation no matter what? You're not saying it wouldn't be exploitation?
That's life. It's just the way. Why change anything?
No, hold on. No. See, now you're changing the question. You didn't use the word. The way you phrased it was not with the word exploitation.
Coercion.
You said that you're going to have to work. You said you're going to have to work to enjoy a quality of life. Yeah, that's how life works.
Okay, I think.
Sure.
Okay, wait. So you have to pay taxes to enjoy quality of life.
But rent seeking is a product of government. Being able to work or being able to get value without putting in effort or value is a product of is this rent seeking concept that is a product of statism.
Okay, then taxes are just a part of life. If you want there to be basic necessities that everyone can enjoy, taxes are just a part of life. You need to fund those somehow. They get taken if you decide to work.
Well, sure, but there's a better way. Yeah, but there's a better way than that. Like, we can have a voluntary system that achieves the same things without all those perversions.
That system not impose coercive measures on the workers of its society?
Wait, I'm saying a voluntary system. If it's voluntary, where's the coercion? Like, are you...
It's not voluntary. How are you not getting this? Oh, ANCAPs are so difficult. And they must all come from this wild place of privilege. I imagine. You have to be. Like, if you're just living, like, the Bitcoin dream, right? I don't tread on me. I don't want the government fucking pockets in my hands.
Applying some other definition of coercion
let me ask you
let
me ask you a basic question, okay? Let's say that you are on a plane, and that plane crash lands on an island, okay? There are only a few survivors. In fact, there are only 2. And you wake up after the first one does. By the time that you have woken up, the other survivor in this plane has claimed all of the coconuts on all of the coconut trees, stacked them on their pile, sheltered that pile with all the wreckage from the plane, and declared they own it. And they say that they would be willing to give you said coconuts if you throat their cock. Now, would you consider that to be a voluntary interaction? Is that a voluntary interaction?
Oh, I wanted to know his response. What did he say? What's the answer? Well, I guess we'll never know. The name of that channel, by the way, is Coconut Island. What is it? Just like a Vosh fan channel? Oh my god, it is. Wow. You know you made it, eh? Hassan has like 20 of those. Where's my fan channels where y'all are just like making money off putting clips of me up there? You have the right, you know. I'm never gonna copyright you. I'm not gonna come after you. Go forth. Go be silly. Make some money.
from people outside.
I'm protected from my personal wealth being sued. Sorry,
we're outside doing or real things in the real world. Probably that's probably a thing. Hey, Acid XX, thank you very much. Appreciate it. He laughed and pivoted. Well, of course, because like if you just put it to something that's so reductive and silly, obviously that coconut analogy, it sounds ridiculous, but ultimately it is supposed to teach that person, that ANCAP, about coercion, right? And that people don't like to think like, well, I mean, hey, if you don't make enough money, that's a you problem. Go get a better job. And you're like, that's not how the world works. Your ability to get good jobs is going to be based on so many factors, many of them socioeconomic, especially if you were raised in a family that allowed you to have enough time to get good grades. They had enough money to be able to get you a tutor. They had enough money to be able to pay for your post-secondary education. Once you had post-secondary education, were you able to stay focused enough to go into a career that is going to make you a whole bunch more money? Is it a career that you actually love? And after that, are you going to be able to go to a training or a vocational school? Like, those are all factors that aren't just like, can you pick yourself up from your bootstraps? And yes, you can, but it's way more difficult when you have all that shit bearing down on you. You know, I don't want to tell anyone here, don't live your best lives. Please live your best lives. Max out, okay? Max out. Get as healthy as you can. Do as much shit as you can. Clean your room. Wash your fucking legs, everyone. He gets it. He gets it, all right? He knows what's going on. Wash your legs. Wash your legs, all of you. Max your life out, okay? That's all great. But at the end of the day, that's not enough. The American dream, or the Canadian dream, or the European dream, the one that we're all sold on, it doesn't just come down to that. It comes down to a lot of factors that are out of your control, you know? Especially things like systemic racism, like something that, like, you know, conservatives and even liberals don't like to talk about. But yeah, that plays a huge factor in it as well. You know, these are things that are outside of your control. Clean your legs. Wash your ass.
If I, let's say, I infringe upon someone's copyright, I pay that all in pre-tax dollars. If they come after me and they sue me, so I am
put aside taxes. Put aside taxes. I'm fine if you want to get rid of the limited liability that corporations have with regard to third parties.
Let's get rid of corporations.
With regard to third parties that do not have a contract with the company. Sure. I mean, I don't think that's an issue.
I would also,
but the pre-tax stuff, let's put aside, because as I said, corporations don't actually pay taxes. Your employees do. But
well, I mean, they're pre-tax in relative to the pass-through.
I mean, I wish everything was pre-tax. I'm not a big fan of taxes, particularly not today.
I don't doubt that.
Of course, you're not a fan of taxes.
And I'll let you. You know, slavery's existed, but from forever. We've had slavery.
How about the triangle slave trade?
All right, Matt, please.
Slavery has existed. Slavery has existed forever. The fact is that something different happened in the 19th century, and it wasn't some innovation with regard to slavery. It was the discovery and the use of capitalism, and the fact that slave labor was mitigated. If you look at the actual wealth created during the 19th century, almost none of it was created as a consequence of slavery. And I know there's a massive political agenda of painting the 19th century in that way, but it is distortive and it is wrong. And if you look at the places in the world without slavery that has taken the same principles as capitalism developed in the 19th century in the United States, they developed wealth as fast, if not faster, than the United States. So the slavery issue is just a massive perversion and distortion, and it's sad to see that is the critique of.
What a surprise that on top of everything else, he's also racist and like a pseudo historian.
You know,
listen. Yep. We're gonna let's just table this because I've literally interviewed half a dozen people.
I know, and
experts at this who disagree.
Experts at a political angle on it. Absolutely. Okay, I'm sure you haven't interviewed the experts that would mitigate that. That would say the opposite.
I have actually talked to many libertarians before who've made a similar argument. Okay. But without the data. Your argument is a counterfactual that's impossible for any of us to argue, which is the internet would have existed even if the government hadn't spent all this money on research, which by the very expense of it is indicative of it is research that they're going out there and they're laying a lot of bets on stuff that doesn't necessarily pay off, which of course capital is highly reluctant to do. We see it in the context of the COVID, right? Like you would not have had, without the billions of dollars that were pumped into these private entities, without the guarantee of distribution, even if this stuff doesn't work, you wouldn't have seen the COVID vaccines developed at the same rate, and you wouldn't have seen so many of them.
Sam, none of that is true. I mean, I encourage people to look at the critiques of the entrepreneur state. I mean, you're referring to a book called Entrepreneur State, where she lays out the case of, well, maybe you're not, but the case that the internet was funded by government. I encourage people to look at the critiques of the entrepreneur state and look at exactly what was funded, what was not funded, and what would have happened if free market, if those elements of that are still free in our markets hadn't stepped in and turned the internet into what we know of it today. I don't believe that's true of COVID either. The fact is that the only reason we have a vaccine today is the two companies were set up completely in the marketplace, not not funded by government, Moderna and BioNgen in Germany, set up trying to do mRNA, trying to create mRNA technologies, and they were ready.
Moderna was heavily funded by the NIH prior to this.
No, it wasn't funded by the NIH. Again, research on.
Yes, it absolutely was. What are you talking about? They got huge amounts of grants from the government, from again, taxpayers.
Yaron, I'll get to the morality of this because, we may have a different value system, but there's a couple of things. I just want to go back to what you were saying about the infrastructure. The government doesn't need to pay the infrastructure. They could.
Roseanne Archibald will be the first next national chief of the Assembly of First Nations. Oh, fuck yeah. That's amazing. That's the first ever woman. Yeah, the first ever woman to hold the position. That's super poggies. That was something that was prevented for a very long time because the Indian Act of Canada didn't allow women to hold any kind of office. They couldn't even vote either in Canada or amongst their own bands. They were reduced to like third-class citizens.
They could charge, the private entities could charge tolls for corporations who you would say at that point would then pass it on to take out of their workers' pay and charge to consumers, I would imagine, right? There's no reason why the toll is any different.
Yeah, don't worry. I'm pulling the ripcord pretty soon.
Well, any expense. A toll is just an expense, right?
Okay.
And there's no reason a tax is not any kind of expense, right?
But
Somebody has to pay.
We also know that one of the things that, and maybe this is just a question of immorality to you, but we have roads that go to just about everywhere in this country. And we have, for instance, mail delivery, you can send a letter regardless how remote you are.
We even have bridges to nowhere. Right?
We have bridges to nowhere. It is true. There are definitely abuses within our system, like there is in any system, whether it's corporate or not.
That's why roads and bridges were a bad idea, because there's bridges to nowhere. The bridge to Terabithia. It's the thing. So let's abolish roads and bridges and all social spending. So saith the ANCAPs.
Not, but the whole point is that private corporations will only seek profit. We know many stories. I'm sure you must know, have heard stories of medical inventions that are built that are maybe helpful to a very narrow amount of people, and their private corporations don't support it. I can tell you that living in an area where there was a tremendous amount of Lyme disease, there was a Lyme vaccine that existed 40 years ago that was about 70% effective, but it was just. You have kids?
I do. I have.
Yeah,
two boys.
when you have little kids. Frustration that they have that the vast majority of Americans subscribe to the idea that society should mitigate mistakes that people make, like things like, and that society should be designed that way, and that it is frustrating for people like you to live in a country where most people feel that way.
Oh, absolutely. We try to educate people not to feel that way. But yes, I would like to live in a place where people are free to aggregate their efforts together to mitigate problems that they see fit on a voluntary basis. I don't believe in coercion. I just don't believe in force. I don't believe anybody has a right to force somebody else
except
to
to protect property.
That is protect. I'm all for protection. I'm protecting your life. Police should protect your life. I think property is an extension of your life. But property is part of your life. I mean, you can't separate the two.
Wait.
If I need to produce stuff in order to live.
You can push back on that. I mean, property's not alive. So that would be an easy retort.
What about government protecting your life if the building falls? Like, because not every one of the 150 people who died in there made that decision.
Sure.
Children didn't. They were shareholders of a building, and they had represented.
The shareholders are owners, and they're responsible for the decision making the decisions they make. But it's to protect your life from somebody else using force against you. It's not from nature. I mean, a hurricane might blow through here. I'm in Puerto Rico right now, and I don't expect the government to protect me from the hurricane. I do expect the government to protect me from somebody trying to shoot me in the street.
Did the government help?
Yeah, but I mean, what if you get sick? What if you get cancer?
Putting electricity back on there?
Well, the government destroyed the electricity grid, and then it rebuilt it in as bad of a shape as it was originally. So the next hurricane, it will go out again.
Was that drug, incidentally, people are saying it was Vioxx. Is that the case?
Vioxx, yes, thank you. It was Vioxx.
Yeah, my understanding is that was a recall that they did themselves. But.
Oh, do you have a better link than Zero Hedge? Zero Hedge is like, don't read Zero Hedge. It's very bad for you. It really dabbles in conspiracy theories. It's got an anonymous editor who goes by the name of Tyler Durden. You'll never know what that's a reference to. But yeah, don't read Zero Hedge. It's not good for your mind.
But but maybe that's incorrect.
No, it's the FDA forced them.
Vioxx had been taken by some 4 million Americans. Out of those patients who took Vioxx, the arthritis drug may have caused approximately 140,000 heart attacks, resulting in an estimated 60,000 deaths. This is according to an FDA investigation. I mean,
may have caused. Notice may. I mean, imagine if they did that with a vaccine. May have, and also Why can't I make that decision? Why can't I make a decision whether I want to take the risk of a heart attack and
You're a much smarter guy than most people who have the ability to assess all these different drugs.
I don't assume that. I actually have a high opinion of most human beings and think that they can make decisions for themselves. And I think
oh, I'm sure it's doomer. Yeah, it's definitely doomer. I'll give you that much. And why did you pivot away from that? Why? Well, do I not have a right to die at the hands of someone who's trying to kill me? But I also want people to protect me. Can we put more money into the military and the police, please?
The philosopher king mentality of Plato, where you get to decide for other people what's good for them.
You're right. You have kids?
I do. I have.
Yeah. When you have little kids, it's a little bit tough to be doing all that medical reading, right?
It's absolutely tough. It's absolutely tough. And part of the reading is finding a good pediatrician so that somebody you can trust who's not going to deceive you. And that's not easy. I'm not saying life's easy.
Fingers crossed. Fingers crossed.
No, it's not about fingers crossed. It's not about fingers crossed. But okay, I do need to run.
I know. I appreciate
the time.
Thank you so much.
Well, all right. I wish I hadn't watched that whole thing. That was pretty draining. I guess in summation, Sam Seder wins, obviously, because the other guy is again living in a fantasy. Do you want movies and Serfs watching the movies? So then come over to the new channels. It's the Serfs, the cinema. Thanks so much for watching, everybody. Can you do the thing, that thumbs up and comment and all those things that help us out in the algorithm that controls every aspect of our lives? Also, if you happen to have a Facebook account, can you delete it? Like just delete it. You should probably delete your Facebook account because it's not a great company. But hey, if you can't do that for whatever reason, I understand. And could you also go to facebook.com/thesurftimes then and give us a little like and a follow. We're just trying to push back against the fact that people like Ben Shapiro happen to dominate the platform entirely. And when everyone asks why do older generations believe the things they believe, one of the problems is the majority of them on social media use Facebook. So to counter that, we're just going to be on there too now. Also, if you happen to have a union or a worker co-op or even a leftist project, podcast, website, Zoom, MySpace, it doesn't matter. We will advertise it for free on this channel. All you got to do is go to weareserfs.com and use the forms that we got there, weareserfs.com. Thanks, everybody.
To our wonderful gods, Xander Corvus, VK Jehannam, T. Grow, and Peyton L. Just, may you smite all of our enemies. To our monarchs, Tom Spiker and the Tim Caucus, we are your humble servants, ready to do all your bidding. To our lords, Evan Nudie, Trevor R., Alexander Thaler, Ryan Lubin, and Jeff Lamb, we shall proudly carry your banner on the online battlefield. To our Knights of the Round Table, Val 9000, Jenna Tal, Dark Puppy, Quiet 185, Anna Loves Riley, Omni, Riley and Anna, Poodlehawk, Multimondi, Trevor Janis, Lemmy 101, Anthropophojak, Saren 42, Chronic to Hemphog, Phone Jenny, Radical Maniac, Ramon Acosta, Jibby Big Nuts, Violent Orchard, Sophie Baby, Political Puppy, Andreas Chiringuito, Zach Christensen, Yopi, Josh Mickelson, Todd Buckingham, and Todd Lajeunesse. We raise our glass and we raise our swords and we salute you.